Reading with your kids.
Hey, welcome to the Reading with Your Kids podcast, a special Christmas Eve edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are looking back to Christmas of 2018. We invited authors from the spooky middle grade books to come on and create an original story for us. And they created an absolutely adorable story that's called Phantom of the Ice Rink. The authors that are joining us today, S A Larsen, Kim Ventrella, Samantha M Clark, David Neilson, Victoria Piontek, Jonathan Rosen, Angie Smibert, Kat Shepard, Sarah Cannon. I gave them a prompt and they gave us a really, really fun story. So without any further ado, let's join the action. Yeah, it was. My niece. I wanted something, a gift for my niece, and Jimena is amazing, and she has fallen in love with hockey. And I thought, how cool would it be if we have a young girl who loves hockey, who's in an arena for the big game, and then forgot something in the locker room, went back to the locker room to get it, and when she came out, that big full arena is empty. What did you guys come up with? Sherry, did you want to start us?
Sure, that's exactly what I did. I basically wrote up your prompt. So I think, David, we need like a spooky moi or something. Give us one. That's right. All right, here we go. Frigid air pressed into Maya as she trailed her fellow teammates down the hollow tunnel. Howls from the packed ice arena echoed off the concrete walls. The edge of her skate blade caught on the rubber mat, and she stumbled. Nerves never got to her, but this was a big game for medieval middle school. The Blue Wrath had annihilated them last year, 9-0. Good thing this year Maya had her lucky charm with her. She slipped her fingers under the neck of her shoulder pad to grip onto the amulet. Panic flushed through her body, and she clawed at her neck. It wasn't there. Her grandmother had given her the amulet last month with the instruction, "Keep it safe, it's special." Maya had laughed it off, and still did, only not right now. Even the possibility of attracting negative energy was out of the question. They needed to win this game. Pivoting on one skate, she raced into the locker room to her hockey bag, and there, on the floor next to it, coiled her chain and Graham's amulet with the weird faces on both sides. It was kind of ugly, but if it helped them win, Maya was all about it. Loud screams muffled through the closed door, and she looped the chain around her neck. It was probably Minda Lou, manager and nosy body, keeping track of her. "Coming," she yelled, and plowed out the locker room door, jogging up the tunnel and tucking the pendant into her equipment. It wasn't until after she hopped onto the ice that she noticed the silence. The arena was empty. And to continue our story, let's go to Kim Ventrella.
Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Maya's heart throbbed in her chest. She swallowed down the panic rising in her throat and glided to the middle of the rink. Her skates cut into the ice, loud in the eerie quiet of the arena. "Graham," she said. Her voice swallowed up by the silence. Her heart beat faster, heat building in the center of her chest. What was happening? Graham's stories flitted through her head. Tales of witches that could twist time and steal children from their beds with a snap of their long, spidery fingers. She'd never believed any of her stories. But now? Hello? Anyone? Her words echoed against the metal ceiling. She searched the seats for any sign of life, a hint of movement, and then she saw it. Not in the stands, but higher up, near the scoreboard. A dark shape was hovering in the shadows, floating in mid-air as if suspended by an invisible string. The heat in Mia's chest grew and grew until she realized that it wasn't her heart at all, but the necklace. Without taking her eyes off the floating shadow, she reached under her uniform and took hold of the pendant. It radiated a gentle warmth that moved up her arms and spread through her body. The tarnished silver glowed a pale shade of blue, making each of the creepy faces appear to be smiling. "Don't be afraid," Graham's voice said in Mia's head. "No matter what happens, I'm always with you." Graham's words and the warmth of the amulet gave her strength. Somehow, the amulet connected her to Graham. "Who's there?" she said, forcing her voice to sound brave. She glided closer to the shadow. In the orange LED lights of the scoreboard, she could just make out a pale face watching her from beneath a hood made of rippling smoke. And now let's go to Samantha Clark.
Dun, 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 dun. For installment 3. Run! Mia's brain screamed, but nothing in her body was listening. Her feet, her eyes, her throat were all frozen. The only part of her that moved was her heart, pounding, pounding, pounding like a fist telling her to wake up and move. Yes, that's what she had to do. She was fully ready for battle with the blue wraiths. But this thing? No way! Even with Graham's voice in her head, this was scarier than any hockey opponent she'd ever played and any horror movie she'd ever seen. Going, she whispered, staring at the pale face. Were those red eyes looking back at her or just the glow from the scoreboard? She couldn't be sure, but whatever it was, it definitely wasn't human. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her foot and her foot wouldn't move. She glanced down, afraid to take her eyes off the hooded figure, but she had to. This wasn't just fear anymore. Something had hold of her foot, and she hoped it wasn't just a giant wad of gum. She hoped it was just a giant wad of gum, but it wasn't gum. It wasn't anything she could see. Then she realized her hand wouldn't move either, or her arm, or her neck. She tried to open her mouth, but that was stuck too. Her gut was fully ready to let loose with the biggest scream, but all that came out was a loud, "Ugh." The only part of her body that was still her own were her eyes, and she flicked them back up to the hooded figure, but it was gone. All that was left was the tiniest hint of smoke. She glanced up, down, side to side, trying to find the figure. Where did it go? She wished she could move, turn around. What if the figure was right behind her, reaching for her? Was that wind she felt in the back of her neck? Was it drool? Graham, she thought, what do I do? As if in answer, the warmth of the amulet turned icy cold. And now it's time for David Neilson to tell us what happens next.
It was a cold unlike anything Mia had ever experienced. A searing, bone-chilling, agonizing cold that chewed you up and spit you out. She wanted to cry out in pain, fear, anything, but could not regain control of her body in any way. Suddenly, when she felt she couldn't stand any more, Graham's amulet let loose with a violent pulse of energy in all directions. And just like that, it wasn't cold anymore. In fact, just like that, I can move. Control restored, Mia whirled about in search of the red-eyed phantom. Even as she searched, half her mind was attempting to digest what had just happened. She'd made eye contact with the phantom. She'd been frozen in place. Graham's amulet had become ice cold before blasting out a wave of energy, and she could move again. Did the amulet just save me? She wondered. Was there some truth in all of Graham's tall tales? Was this amulet magic? Her thoughts froze as her eyes spotted the phantom floating down to the ice behind her. She threw all amulet-related questions onto the back burner in order to concentrate on the unholy vision of evil now glaring out at her. It seemed angry, like really angry. Like how in the world did this little human girl throw off my spell angry? Who are you? Mia found the courage to ask. Although, if she was being honest, a better question might have been, what are you? Rather than answer, the red-eyed spectre opened its mouth and screamed. And now we'll go to Angie Smibert to find out what he screamed.
The sound was like 1,000 snowy white barn owls screeching in the dead of night. Mia had heard one in Graham's barn, but this was no owl. The phantom shriek tore through her and the arena. It was all Mia could do to cover her ears, amulet still clutched in one hand. The ice beneath her skates moaned and crackled. A giant crevasse zippered open before her, and an icy hand, did phantoms have hands? Pushed her hard, sending her racing right toward the gaping maw in the ice. She could feel its hunger. Its icy teeth widened, and the phantom chuckled. Stop, the amulet whispered. Was that Graham's voice? Don't let it take you to the other side. Hockey stop, Mia's brain shouted, and her feet answered. Her right leg instinctively turned so her inside edge began shaving the ice, slowing her down. But was it enough? Well, now it's time for Kat Shepard to tell us what happens next.
Dun, dun, dun! The blades of her skates shrieked as she dug in, stopping just inches from the chasm's edge. In the darkness below her, she saw only roiling movement as slick, sinewy shapes seethed over one another, rising toward the surface like bubbles in a cauldron. Mia couldn't make out what the shapes were, but the sound of them was like thousands of teeth chattering at once, and they were coming for her. Mia fell to her knees and scurried backwards, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her eyes scoured the arena, searching for an escape. There, across the ice, a break in the wall. Could she make it? With quivering legs, she stood up and pushed off, keeping her stance wide and her center of gravity low, just like she'd learned in her hockey drills. But just as she was about to reach the wall's opening, her skate stuck and she pitched forward, her palms slapping the ice as she skidded across the slick surface. She twisted to see what had caught her skate and found the phantom towering over her, its red eyes glowing with malicious triumph. The sound of its laughter burned into Mia like an acid. She gritted her teeth and squeezed her eyes shut. "Please, Graham," she whispered. "Help me." The amulet had protected her before. Could it protect her again? She reached for the stone, but her hand closed around nothing but empty space. Now we have Sarah Cannon continuing.
That's when she realized the amulet had flown backward when she fell. Instead of dangling in front of her, it was at the back of her neck, pulling against its chain, facing the demon. This time, she felt a rush of heat and a pulse of outward force. Over her shoulder, she saw the demon fly across the arena and slam into the clear plexiglass wall on the other side. The amulet had just performed the world's biggest body check. That is, if phantoms had bodies. Body checks were totally illegal in middle school hockey, but Mia figured there was an exception to every rule. So far, the amulet had warded off the phantom at every turn, but Mia knew the best defense was a good offense. If she could figure out how to use the amulet on purpose, she could banish the specter for its many rule infractions, including delaying the game by vanishing all the spectators. And now it's Jonathan's turn.
I think it's mine, Victoria.
All right.
Mia searched her memories. Her grandmother had told her so many stories. Stories Mia thought were just tales to entertain her. Only now Mia knew her grandmother had been trying to prepare her for a moment just like this. She had been teaching her about the amulet and the demons she might have to fight. There was one story her grandmother frequently told her about a demon who collected souls. Her grandmother had never described the way the demon looked, but she had talked about what it wanted. It wanted the essence of the living so it could keep strong. Like a spider, it trapped people and collected them in a hiding place to devour later. Mia wondered if the demon attacking her was the same one from her grandmother's stories. And then, with a sinking feeling, she thought about all the missing people. If this was the same demon, then all those missing people would be demon food if she didn't do something. Worse, if the demon had taken them somewhere to devour, she would not only have to figure out how to defeat him, but also how to save the trapped hockey audience. The demon whirled overhead, threatening her. It was going to attack again, and Mia had to be ready. Not just to defend herself, but to fight. Mia had to figure out how to control the amulet. The demon floated closer and opened its gaping mouth. Mia felt bile rise in her throat. The demon wanted to eat her. Mia forced herself to take a deep breath to clear her head. She needed to stay calm. If she was going to fight, she needed to think. She tried to remember what her grandmother had said about magical amulets in her stories. Mia recalled all the things she knew about amulets. They had power, of course, but what about the person wielding it? They always had to figure out how to control it by reaching deep inside themselves to find the source of their true power. Except Mia wasn't sure she had a source of true power. Even if she did, she only had about 10 seconds to find it before she was demon food.
Without a moment to spare, Mia seized the amulet in both hands and used the surroundings to take shape in her mind and projected them outward. Cold. No, not just cold. It went beyond that. Freezing. Suddenly, several jagged frozen fingers of ice shot out from the amulet and snared the phantom in its grasp. The phantom shrieked for several seconds before the icy fingers curled into a fist and enclosed the phantom in a solid block of ice. Just like that, Mia was back on the rink with a hockey stick in her hands. The roar of the crowd startled her. She realized that she was within 10 feet of the goal and controlling the puck. Go, go, the fans urged her forward. Mia deked left, enticing the goaltender to commit before she swerved back to the right, and with a hard snap of the wrists, fired the puck into the back of the net, sending the home crowd into a frenzy. Mia thrust her arms skyward in triumph, but her elation lasted only moments until the sound of the whistle shattered her euphoria. The crowd groaned as one entity as the referee skated over and pointed to the penalty box. What? Mia cried. What did I do? He motioned toward the amulet, using a foreign substance to gain an advantage. But the referee held his hand up. He clearly had no desire to hear any of her explanations. Mia gritted her teeth and skated over to the penalty box. She stopped in her tracks when she saw, already sitting there, behind the glass partition separating the two teams, was the Phantom. Her shoulders slumped and her hood pulled low over her eyes. Mia took the seat right on the other side of the partition. What are you in here for? Mia asked. The Phantom shrugged. Stealing souls and trying to devour fans. Mia sighed and shook her head in disgust. I swear they're making the game too soft nowadays. The Phantom nodded. Ain't that the truth? The Phantom turned to Mia. By the way, I was a big fan of your grandmother's. Best demon-slaying hockey player I ever saw. Mia smiled. Thanks. She studied the Phantom for a moment. She didn't look as intimidating as before. As a matter of fact, they weren't so different at all. Say, do you want to get together in another dimension and practice sometime? The Phantom laughed. I'd like that.
Bravo! Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It'll be a special Christmas Day episode of the show with another brand new original story written by our friends at CatholicTeenBooks.com. They're coming on. The name of this story is St. Nicholas Eve. That's all happening on the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so amazingly fun. Of course, our guests from SpookyMiddleGrade.com. S A Larsen, Kim Ventrella, Samantha M Clark, David Neilson, Victoria Piontek, Jonathan Rosen, Angie Smibert, Kat Shepard, Sarah Cannon. I also want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q, Jordan Saley, Stephanie Davila, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. You really are amazing. We want to thank you for joining us, of course. We want to thank you for being a fan, being a supporter, whether you've been with us since 2017 when we launched or whether you're a new listener. Thank you so very much for being here. But most of all, thank you so very much for the gift that you've given to the world. Your kids, your family. And every time you take a moment to read with your kids, that's another gift because you're helping to make the world a better place. Merry Christmas. See you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.
Yeah.